Mega Man, or in this case myself, why are you still staring at me at the actual full capture screen? I don't know why you're surely still doing that ever since in Mega Man 3, 4, 5, and especially 6, and hell, even the forms of Mega Man 9 and 10. So why are you still doing it in Mega Man 11? That doesn't make any much sense to me. Anyways though, enough about that, or in this case a staring contest if you will. Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I am Mega Man here from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Mega Man 11 for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and I don't know about the PC version I'm afraid, because I have no database about the forms of PC users or anything like that. So yeah, last time we actually did manage to tackle the forms of only 3 Robot Masters, which are Block Man, Acid Man, and Impact Man. And today for this episode is the fact that we're about to be taking on the rest of the Robot Masters, in this case 5 of those Robot Masters left. So we have the forms of the next Robot Master we're going to be taking on next is the forms of Bounce Man. So, and as far as if you can tell, those who lived in Japan, this particular Robot Master was also known as Rubber Man, just because, well, if you couldn't tell, he's made out of rubber. So this stage is so similar to the forms of, not only but the forms of Plant Man stage from Mega Man 6, because I'll mention about that as soon as we get to this one section. And it's also so similar to the forms of Spring Man stage from Mega Man 7, except it's a little bit more colorful, and plus it's on the next generation of consoles this time around. So, because the reason why I say it's so similar to the forms of Spring Man stage from Mega Man 7 is because you're going to be bouncing around all over the place, but this time, rather than just springs, instead it was actually bouncing balls, because of, you know, just trying to make it a little bit more colorful and everything. So even then, yeah, you're gonna have to spend most of your time bouncing around all over the place. Especially noticeable, you have to hold down the jump button every time you want to able to bounce way higher up. And then that way you could able to potentially try to get your momentum going. So naturally speaking, that's how you essentially will go for here. And also, as you can see, we actually stumbled across by the forms of those little robotic hand catcher looking things right there. Every time you use your Mega Buster and stuff like that, basically you're able to actually just let the hands go into the opposite side, as you can see right there. And then when it counts down to 3 seconds, then you'll be fluked at the forms of another spots of the level. So that's pretty cool for the most part though, even though it can get pretty tricky sometimes when we get to a later portion of the level. But thankfully though, with the forms of the actual weapon, but the forms of the acid barrier, then we could able to potentially try to make the level a little bit easier, especially on the normal difficulty. And as far as guys should probably already know about this, when it comes to the actual main differences between any other difficulties with Mega Man 11 as far as this is concerned. Both the normal mode or higher difficulties of Mega Man 11, they don't offer you as many of those checkpoints, but unlike in easier difficulties, most notably casual mode or newcomer mode especially, it does have quite a lot of checkpoints around here. So even then though, because of this though, it just makes it incredibly stingy sometimes when it comes to checkpoint system in the normal mode, I feel like, but because when we get to the actual later stage, most notably by the forms of Torchman stage, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe about the fact that the checkpoint system has gone stingy at one point. Especially noticeable because of how the fact that there was one particular section, or actually one of those sections were able to throw you off in a slight significant. But even then though, we'll get to that as soon as we get to that stage. So anyway, a few things I want to explain about this, and again, do apologize by the forms of the lack of uploading schedules recently, because today was actually forms of the 28th of December in 2018, so we've actually got ourselves 4 more days to go until 2019 rather is about to be on the horizon. So yeah, that's that might be pretty awesome at the same time. Also, we got ourselves these mini boss here, which basically all you have to do is basically just take down the actual frog body, and every time you actually kill the frog body, then there is actually this real looking robot inside the actual frog body, and that way you can able to actually take him down easier with either your rapid shot Mega Buster, or you can able to actually potentially try to use the block dropper, which we'll show that off later. And you know what, I said this before, this stage is so similar to Plant Man stage from Mega Man 6 because, well, there are some enemies that occasionally just trying to pop up on you really easily, such as like this one for instance. But again, if you get knocked back, then you would suffer your death suffering. So even then though, you have to stay sharp and you have to be very cautious at the same time as well when it comes to this level itself. So yeah, you should probably pay attention to that though, especially noticeable that, well, unless the speed gear will able to potentially help you for the most part though, whilst in other times though, then, you know, you get the idea with this particular solutions here, so... So, there's quite a few things I want to mention about this, actually. It's the fact that recently in Japan, Mario Luigi RPG 3 DX, or in this case, Mario Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey for the Nintendo 3DS, has been just recently released on the Nintendo 3DS in Japan, during the likes of today. So even then though, and I really do apologize by the forms of my my throat at the moment is because, well, you know how commentary works about the fact that if I talk way too much, then sometimes my voice will able to get a little bit more lost, as far as I'm aware, even though I do need to able to drink my drink bottle in case if I need some more energy going when it comes to commentary skills and department and all that stuff, which can be potentials there. So, anyway, that's enough about that, and I've heard there's actually a Let's Play of the forms of Mario Luigi RPG 3 DX, but the forms of the only, portion at the moment is the forms of Bowser's Inside Story, because we already know about the game ever since almost 10 years ago right about now, for the original Nintendo DS, that, you know, the 3DS version of Mario Luigi Bowser's Inside Story is basically the exact same game as the DS counterparts, but except on the 3DS hardware, so it's a shame there's no 3D effects on it though, unlike the ones of how it does it in the forms of, you know, Mario and Luigi Dream Team Brothers, and especially noticeable with Mario and Luigi Paper Jam Brothers especially. But when it comes to Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story, they don't have 3D effect on it whatsoever, which is a kind of a shame, but I think I'm still really hyped for it at least, because of all the actual Mario Luigi RPG series, Bowser's Inside Story was easily the best entry in the series, just because, well, at least in the DS version of the game anyway, because the music is so phenomenal, and the gameplay itself is, you know, a massively improvement over the forms of the previous two, and, you know, it's just a lot more fun in general. Even though I haven't really gone back into the DS version of Bowser's Inside Story just yet, because of, there was, the leveling up system I need to continuously leveling up for. I think I should probably able to start my fresh file again until whenever I decide to able to leveling up. I'm not exactly sure. Just in case by the forms of that, how the fact of the matter is though, there might be some tougher boss variations. Most notably the X formations of themselves, I'm presuming so, but I digress. So yeah, here's the another frog robot again, but even then though you have to fight this thing twice. And what's great is that the block dropper is easily the overpowered weapon with that specific boss. So yeah, that's pretty cool stuff. And I guess there's not much else I can really say when it comes to gaming itself. Other than, during the likes of yesterday, though I haven't mentioned about this during yesterday's video, I've actually picked up quite a few items with me today. Or in this case, during the likes of yesterday, I should say. And before we get to this, however, though, you might be thinking that you might actually give yourselves a hard time with this particular section right there, especially on the normal difficulty. Well, if you actually use the acid barrier, not only does it protect you by the forms of the actual, like, projectiles and stuff like that, but also it can actually just manage to able to protect you while you're simply just doing a little bit of a tricky bouncy sections right there, which I think it is certainly really helps, especially noticeable as you saw me using those occasionally in this level. So yeah, that's a pretty cool stuff in general. Still, the knockback is still a thing, but you know how knockback is usually kind of annoying sometimes, but either way though, that we can hopefully seem to sure that I can able to actually finish up the main game without even getting myself the forms of, well, I might still able to actually get one day, but most of the time I always try to go after by the forms of energy tanks, and especially noticeable with you know, extra 1-ups, and especially noticeable with the weapon tanks, which we'll get into that in a moment later. And especially noticeable with one mystery tank, which it could be around in here somewhere though, which I don't know if I ever to be found one yet. But either way though, let's go ahead and just keep on bouncing at the right time with these little particular bouncy balls and stuff like that. And every once in a while there's going to be a big drop from here. And you have to directly aim yourself if you manage to able to go way higher up, because if you manage to able to actually just stuck on the ceiling, as you can see right there, then you're probably not going to go anywhere for this point. So anyways, let's go ahead and move along. And truth be told, we actually reached to the very end. So anyway, let's go ahead and take care of this enemy first before you're able to take on the forms of you know, Bounce Man, or in this case, Rubber Man, for those of you who lived in Japan, as I said this before. And, you know, you get the idea with this particular solution. So, anyways, before we start this off, let's go ahead and use our energy tank, and we'll go ahead and use the actual pile driver to deal with his weakness. So here we go, folks. This is the forms of Bounce Man, and again, his weakness is the forms of Pile Driver. Oh wow, I got my another trophy right there. That's pretty cool. So yeah, the best way to deal with this though, as far as if you want to deal the insane amount of damage to the forms of Bounce Man, use the actual power gear, and then you would able to actually just pile drive right into this particular Bounce Man, and if you do so, then they'll deal the final blow with the forms of Bounce Man. So there we go. Oh my god, another trophy right there. And another one. Okay, that's pretty clever actually. So yeah, it looks like I'm gonna get an insane amount of trophies in this game because of you know, this is actually my first time playing through the actual game. I know exactly how this game is actually worked out where it comes to weaknesses in mind with every single Robot Masters all by itself. But there we go, we are done with Bounce Man. Overall, it's a pretty good stage, but it can be pretty tricky sometimes. But hey, at least we got it. At least we got it though. Still, so the actual weapon for Bounce Man is the forms of Bounce Ball, which not only can able to actually spread in by the forms of 6 balls, but also you can able to actually spread from left or right if you actually use the power gear equipped. So yeah, definitely helpful though in the later parts.
Doctor, is something wrong?
The double gear system. It was so very long ago. It was on that day, Wily and I had our falling out. He quite literally threw a wrench in our gears. We were students then, each pursuing robotics research in our own way. Each of us was passionate about forging the way ahead to a future where humans and robots might live together in harmony. By giving robots independent thought, they could be true partners to humankind at last.
Naive as always. Even robots that think for themselves will never be anything more than tools. But with unstoppable power, insurmountable speed, it's only when we build robots with the power to outdo humans that people will truly accept robots for what they are. And with my double gear system, we can make that dream a reality. With this installed, any robot can instantly become a hero.
However, I was strongly opposed to Wily's ideas and research. The double gear system, it puts an incredible strain on the robots that use it. And if it fell into the wrong hands, it could be used to cause terrible harm. At the time, a committee was convened, and Wily's research was cancelled in favor of my independent thought research. Wily never forgave me, and his views have grown ever more extreme since then. How ironic that my efforts to quench Wily's hot-headedness before it led him astray only ended up fueling the fire.
Doctor, I never knew.
If only I'd shown him there was a way to work together, instead of just telling him that he was wrong. maybe we'd still be friends.
A way to work together.
Even the double gear system can be a tool for good, if used properly. But using it properly requires proper judgment. Wily's dream of developing technology to make any robot into a hero could become reality if used by you. I'm trusting you, Mega Man. Oh, I almost forgot something very important. I've just finished giving Rush a good tune-up. He's all ready to head out with you. Rush! Rush, help Mega Man and keep him safe. Be a good boy now.
We've got this, Rush. Okay, let's go!
Do you want to explain about the rush jets? Which, truth be told for this point, I pretty know exactly how this will work. So even then though, before you're able to actually discuss upon body forms of specific stuff I just want to get into, I don't have that enough of those bolts so that I can able to buy the actual like superior energy saver Nio or Nio. I really can't pronounce that very well for this point, folks, because again, it's been a while since I actually managed to play through Mega Man games for quite some time. So anyways, for the most part though, as you can see, I managed to farm myself body forms of extra lives because I just feel like buying extra lives sometimes. But anyways though, yeah, with the Rush Jet, very similar to the likes of how it does in Mega Man 4 and onwards, it allows you to once again traverse through a straightforward jet, which, either way though, plays exactly like how it does in Mega Man 4 and onwards. Not Mega Man 3 though, but in the forms within Mega Man 4 and onwards. So, as you can see, I've managed to able to customize my controls a little bit into shoot with the circle button and use the rush coil for the triangle button, because I feel like using these shoots with the triangle button can get pretty awkward for me sometimes, which either way though, that might actually be a little bit more of a confidence right there. So that's why it's essentially trying to able to deal with that. So anyways though, let's move on to the forms of Fuse Man next, because that'll be his next weakness. It might actually be something to do with like bouncy, something like that. So anyways though, let's get into this. And just like the forms of how it does it in the forms of being the Electman stage from Mega Man 1, and most of the actual electric robot masters in general, it's going to be, once again, it's going to be themed in the forms of electrical environments. So, but at least this music itself is actually pretty awesome, actually. Even then though, I really do enjoy the actual soundtrack in general in Mega Man 11, which is pretty top notch. And either way though, that might actually make it happen. So anyway, yeah, with the actual like discussions, as one to point things out, I actually got myself quite a few items with me during the likes event yesterday in the forms of my shopping department. Even though I was gonna save it up, but in forms of like, well, recently I've managed to able to pre-order myself the forms of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe for the Nintendo Switch recently, which that will be my top priority when it comes to the first game of 2019 choice, for me anyway. Well, there's also another two which I think I established that before, or actually we established that before, which you know, there is Kingdom Hearts 3 and Mario Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey, as far as I established that in a moment ago, by the forms of the Japan's release date. And by the way, with the forms of the actual bounce ball abilities, one thing is actually a thing I loved about this weapon in general is that not only you can able to actually just use that as a somewhat of a projectile madness and stuff like that, but it can also actually destroy the actual environmental hazards, mainly by the forms of electrical currents, which is pretty cool and pretty handy at the same time, which that's the reason why I really do enjoy the actual Mega Man series entirely, because not only by the forms of certain skills and strategies department, but there's also a clever way you can able to actually discover those for yourself, to see how it actually works out to be. So yeah, that's a pretty cool stuff in general. Of course, much like how it does in the forms of in any other single Mega Man games, Mega Man can still climb up ladders as to be expected and such, but either way, I don't know if there's a way that you can able to upgrade to actually climb ladders faster, upgrades, just like the ones of how it does in Mega Man 8. But even then, I might be entirely wrong about that. But anyways, how did I got hit right there? I think I just did that section in a bad timing as possible. So, oh well, no big deal. So anyways though, there are some items I've got, buddy forms of the actual shopping from the likes of yesterday. I've actually got myself 2 new DVDs, which are once again Disney themed. And this time around though, I've actually got myself Basil, the Great Mouse Detective, or in this case, the Great Mouse Detective, for those who lived in North America. And, buddy forms of that, I also got myself the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Because of this though, Basil the Great Mouse Detective, I haven't watched that for freaking donkey's years, so I might as well able to watch that on my own time. And for Hunchback of Notre Dame, because of the Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance world that was based off from, I think I should probably be able to actually give that film a very, very good time with. Especially noticeable because of Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance has been, you know, introduced that world for quite some time, even for a long time actually, since, you know, in 2012/2017 for the PlayStation 4 version, so you guys should already know about this at this point. Originally I was trying to able to get myself Big Hero 6 due to the likes of the, you know, the Kingdom Hearts 3 world, but unfortunately though, it was being sold out. Although, I wasn't going to be potentially trying to get the Blu-ray, version of the actual film because I wasn't really into with the forms of Blu-ray collecting sake. I'm most notably because of how the fact that, well, for one, most of the prices with the forms of the Blu-ray films itself is pretty expensive most of the time. Well, not as entirely expensive as the HD games all by itself, including HD consoles as well. Oh god, I'm getting butt kicked by this guy. It's so similar to the forms of back in the day in Mega Man 1. Oh jeez, what the hell I'm thinking. Anyway, yeah, as a result of that kinds of stuff, I'm always in it when it comes to like collecting DVDs and all that stuff, which either way though, that's the only thing I do like about the forms of, not only by the forms of films themselves, but also TV series I always attempt to enjoy the most, like Tom and Jerry for instance, and especially the Penguins of Madagascar, SpongeBob SquarePants, even though I haven't really collected as many of those SpongeBob SquarePants DVD collections these days, just because, well, I just feel like the forms of some of these shows I seems to be able to enjoy these days now, by the forms of, you know, the Penguins of Madagascar, as I said this before, including by the forms of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic so far, because of next year they're going to be able to conclude the actual series with Series 9, so, you know. So anyways though folks, before we get to this however though, here we go with Fuse Man, and his weakness is the forms of Bounce Ball, unless if you're assuming if you're able to actually just try to angle these shots right, especially noticeable with the forms of using the power gear itself, that way it deals the pretty good amount of damage actually, even though I'm almost gonna die right there, and it's a good thing I managed to grab my energy tank by the forms of the previous room I just went to, so naturally if you manage to take him down like quite a few shots on him, then as soon as you're able to deal with all that, then that's Fuse Man. So there you go then. So with that being said, we've only got 3 more Robot Masters to go, and after all that, then we can able to move on to, as to be expected, the Dr. Wily stage. So, but even then though, unlike any forms of how it does it in the forms of in Mega Man 3, and Mega Man 4, 5, and 6, and especially noticeable in Mega Man 7 and 8, and even Mega Man and Base, they don't offer you to go for the middle part of the actual stages itself, most notably by the forms of like, you know. So here we go with the new weapon right here, and as you can see we have the Scramble Thunder, which not only you can able to actually use that on ground, or even just try to shoot it downwards, but you can also shoot it upwards. See, Fernando, that will come in really handy though, especially noticeable if you really want to take down those annoying enemies like the forms of those red homing missiles, as far as I've shown you guys during about a few moments ago and stuff, which either way though, that does really help. So anyway, let's go ahead and purchase ourselves, you know, the Energy Saver Neo, which that way is a superior version of the forms of the Energy Balancer ever since the forms of the past few games, which thankfully though, I was able to actually just use that at any point. So there we go then, and let's go ahead and save our game quickly in case if anything else will happen. And let's just say this right now, we've only just got one energy tank left at the moment due to the actual shop I just purchased. And everything else will be just as alright as it used to be. So anyways, let's move on to the forms of the next robot master in Mega Man 11, which we have Tundra Man. And can you guess what this stage is going to be located with? For the actual animation itself? Yes, we are once again exploring for the icy themed levels. So, you know, just like how it does in Iceman stage from Mega Man 1, and especially noticeable with the forms of, I would say by the forms of Blizzard Man from Mega Man 6, and especially noticeable with, Freeze Man from Mega Man 7, and, I would say Cold Man from Mega Man 10. I might be wrong, even though it's been a long time since I actually just managed to able to actually play some Mega Man games these days, so I must admit that I do apologize. Just like in those ice-themed levels, ever since the past few Mega Man games, there were a few times though, there might be some ice physics every once in a while, so be prepared for that, especially noticeable you might as well able to slip all over the place most of the time. And then, the good thing about this though, oh wow, we got another trophy, that's pretty cool. And basically, the way that trophy describes him within is that, you can now able to, oh, another trophy, Jesus Christ, so many trophies I've actually got in my actual playthrough of Mega Man 11, kind of think about it. Of course, there was some other trophies I seem to got on my own time as well, but I seem to accidentally got myself my failed montage with the forms of successful attempts on most of the stages themselves. So, that's one thing I need to compliment on it, so... Of course, just like in the forms of how it does in Mega Man 10 level, but in forms of, let's just say Blizzard Man and stuff like that, basically, you could able to actually just get used to with the actual wind mechanics. So, and just like in the forms of Mega Man 10's ice-themed level, then, you know, you have to watch out for the actual winds, because, you know, it'll tend to throw you off at points. So, anyways though, I think that's about it when it comes to the actual films I've got at the moment. Well, most notably only 2 of them at the moment. And now let's get into the forms of the most important parts when it comes to this particular channel itself. Now we have to be, of course, games themselves. Well, not only for games, but also by the forms of Nintendo eShop card. Even then though, I'll get into more on that later. But let's talk about the games themselves first. First of all, I actually got myself by the forms of my next PlayStation Vita game this time around though. And this time around though, I've actually got myself Mortal Kombat. Now, I've usually got Mortal Kombat 9 back in about 2011. But from that time, I was about 13 years old. Well, I wasn't there that time, but Sonic told me that he accidentally managed to got the game when he was about like 13 years old that time, which is pretty unsuitable when it comes to like 18 or under. So 18 or over is definitely the best requirements to able to actually play Mortal Kombat 9. Now, I'm very glad that we actually got that game again, but this time around though on the PlayStation Vita version, because I've heard from several reviews, the Vita version is definitely more superior than the forms of how it does it on the 360 or even the PlayStation 3. Well, I will say is that the PS3 version does have its best visuals throughout because it's on the actual console hardware. I will say though is that the Vita version does feel rough around the does look a bit rough around the edges sometimes because it's on a handheld, and also not to mention though, I'm pretty sure the voice clips has been slightly a little bit glitched out at one form or another. You know, it's kind of like the same thing for how it does it in Mortal Kombat Unchained from the PlayStation Portable, which is essentially a you know, a port to the forms of Mortal Kombat Deception, but on the PSP. So it's kind of like the same thing for how it does it in the forms of the PlayStation Vita version of Mortal Kombat 9. Even though, despite the fact that that game was now, at least the 360 and the PlayStation 3 version, it was now 7 years old now. Which either way though, because we're still in 2018. But eventually when it gets to 2019, it will be 8 years old. Oh, Jesus Christ. So many games, they'll become way more older. Even when it gets to 2020, it will be a decade old. Well, especially noticeable when it gets to like... Well, let's just say Super Mario Galaxy 2 is almost going to be a decade old. Like, in the forms of when it gets to 2020. And same applies by the forms of Pokemon Soul Silver, or in this case, Heart Gold, rather, and Soul Silver remake. and especially noticeable with Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing for basically every single consoles at this rate. And also same applies for Sonic Colors and Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. And what else is what games that came out in 2010? I think it was Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Mini-Land Mayhem, and also the DSi XL. Well, at least in terms of the international version, because the Japanese version came out in 2009 after all, so... Anyways, though, you get the idea with this particular solutions for this point. So, and as far as I've played Mortal Kombat 9 on the PlayStation Vita, I found it's actually pretty good, actually. Sure, it takes a while to get used to the actual game again, because it's been about quite a few years to able to come back into that game now, so, you know.
It's showtime! I'm like a rose, frozen in ice.
Alright, so here we go with the forms of Tundra Man, and this boss feels exactly similar to the forms of Freeze Man from Mega Man 7, because the actual environment on the actual background, to say the least, is also very similar to the forms of in Mega Man 7, kind of think about it. Except the fact of the matter is, though, is the fact that it's way more easier this time around, though, than in forms of how it does in Freeze Man in Mega Man 7, at least. And, also another thing, oh yeah, you have to be very careful from that, and good thing I managed to use my energy tank for my disposal in case of this section. So, and in this case, if you do not pay attention to that whatsoever, then you might as well able to get yourself butt kicked during that time. But as soon as you're able to actually use his weakness, mainly by the forms of the Scramble Thunder, then you would able to actually deal with him no problem. So, but you have to be very cautious for most of the time though, because obviously ice physics is still a thing, but other than that though, you would deal with him just fine. So, there we go then. And let's see what weapon that we have got after doing with the forms of in Tundra Man. Let's just see and find out. Which we did have, by the forms of probably a good weapon to use actually. And that's the forms of Tundra Storm. And not only by the forms of how the fact that you can able to do a little bit of a Tundra Storm so much so, but if you use the power gear, acts like a screen nuke. So even then though, it becomes very handy, especially noticeable when we get to the next boss fight or the next robot master that we can able to deal out from. And let's just go ahead and purchase ourselves bitty forms of the rest of the actual energy tanks, even though I could potentially try to save those bolts up when we get to the forms of actually let me go ahead and buy the super guard in case if we actually get ourselves our defense up, so that way it can able to become in very helpful in some situations like so. And let's just go ahead and, actually I don't have that enough of those, bolts I can purchase when it comes to able to, don't have that enough to able to get that specific upgrade, which is essentially the gear booster, which, basically, I'll explain more details onto that when we're able to eventually buy that by the forms of the actual Dr. Light's lab. So even then, that way we could potentially try to deal with it. And we maxed out on lives, just like the likes of how it does in previous games. If you go grab another extra one up, it will be still maximum of 9 extra lives. So you can't go like 10 or higher than that. So yeah, that's as far as we will consider this fact. Alright, here we go folks, on to possibly the hardest level in the entire game of Mega Man 11, assuming this is on a normal difficulty or higher, and that is the forms of Torchman stage. Now, the reason why I say this is easily one of the most difficult levels of the entire game of Mega Man 11 is because, well, this is a prime example about the fact that there was not only one, but 3 times that we might actually come across into a very dangerous section in the entirety of the level itself, which I'm pretty sure many of you already know what I'm talking about here. And, as a matter of fact though, you might as well able to die a lot. And even then though, what if I managed to did this off screen? It took me, and I cannot believe I say this, it took me 12 attempts to able to actually do this successfully. Not only by the forms of successful attempts, but if you really want to able to actually save your Tundra Storm whenever we get to the actual weakness of Torchman, then, well, you have to be very specific when it comes to able to doing a lot of timing requirements, and most of the time, you have to come across into that very dangerous instant death firewall 3 times, but if you do eventually die, with a very potential purpose of able to deal with a lot of trial and error situations like so, then guess what? Then, assuming if you're able to actually play this on normal difficulties, I said this before, this stage is stingy with checkpoints, assuming this is on normal mode as I'm playing it right now. Unless if you play this on casual mode or newcomer mode, then it just makes it a little bit more comfortable for you. But when it comes to like hardcore gamers like I usually was, then this level can be pretty hellish sometimes, especially when checkpoints are super stingy at one point. So, anyways though, there's the actual chicken rod, or the turkey right there, so again, with the Tundra Storm, with the power gear on, or activated I should say, then this really do helps, especially noticeable how the fact that, well, it kills every single part of it, like the forms of enemies, and especially with the forms of the environmental hazards, and you name the rest. And overall, this is easily the greatest weapon to use, especially noticeable if you're having a hard time with the actual level itself, which, by the way, it really still rocks. So anyways, this is the next second section, which again is very difficult, and what makes it a little bit incredibly bugging for me anyway, since this is on the 2.5D platforming perspective this time around, rather than just going back to 8-bit setting, unlike any forms of how it does in Mega Man 9 and 10. Well, chances are, for some odd reason, is that much like any forms of how it does in Blockman, which I have the same issue from here, sometimes my depth perception trying to able to actually just go through gap to gap when it comes to those particular sections, because as you can tell, I accidentally missed out on that weapon tank once again. And by the way, we actually did manage to obtain the weapon tank from Tundra Man stage, and you know, basically if you manage to use that specific tank, it actually refuels every single weapons from you. See, Fernando, that could be incredibly handy for you, so definitely way more up there though. So yeah, you get the idea with this particular point. Anyways, let's get back into my topic when it comes to the depth perception, when it comes to jumping through those holes and all that stuff. Sometimes it really bugs me, because either way though, I swear I was trying to able to jump through the hole, but then next thing you know, I keep on getting stuck by the forms of the actual ceilings itself. And to make matters worse is the fact that every time when I seriously get screwed over by the forms of so many sections like these ones, for instance, not only does it give me some plenty of trial and error, but it's also because of how the fact that if you do not make it in nick of time, well, unless if you have a speed gear equipped with you, but chances are you might as well able to actually keep on getting stuck most of the time because of that stupid instant death scrolling firewall section, which either way though is not that pleasant. So, but thankfully though, with the forms of the actual power gear equipped, especially noticeable with the Tundra Storm with you, basically it makes the entire purpose of the actual stage a little bit easier, and especially it really helps with the forms of how the fact that if you use the actual Tundra Storm at the right time, with the forms of the actual instant death firewall, as you can see, the actual firewall itself actually freezes. So it doesn't last very long that often, because in fact it might actually break free, as is so much so for right now. And no matter what though, then it could able to actually make the level a little bit easier for you. So there we go. Jeez, that is by far the most difficult level in the entire game. I'm gonna tell you about this right about now. And thankfully though, since we're actually gonna be using that weapon tank from early on, but you know. Alright then, Torchman, bring it on. So as you can tell, again, that his weakness is definitely by the forms of Tundra Storm, especially noticeable if you're actually using the Power Gear one equipped, then you should be able to actually deal the insane amount of damage to the forms of Torchman. At least for this particular boss fight, you're probably not going to go after him for your first time playing through this, because I will say this right now, he is definitely a lot more tougher. One of the toughest robot masters to deal with in the forms of this entire game. So, just to warn you right about now, don't go after him first. Just go through after, like, let's just say Blockman first, or it's entirely up to you. If you want to able to follow my guide or anything like that, or some other YouTube videos out there, but I digress. So anyways, let's see, we got ourselves our Blazing Torch. Which, by the way, if you manage to able to use that, assuming if you're jumping, or in this case on foot, the fireboard itself will able to actually launch upwards, but eventually it goes diagonally downwards. See, Fernando, that could be pretty good as far as I'm aware for this particular stuff. But when we get to the forms of the last Robot Master, which are considerably by the forms of Blast Man, then you probably know what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and purchase ourselves the Special Gear Booster, which is hands down also one of the most handiest upgrades that we can able to upgrade from. Because of this though, we'll get to more details onto that when we actually get into the forms of the Blast Man stage. And before we get into this, however, though, let's purchase Beat the Bird, which either way though, we'll get to more on him whenever we get to it so far with the forms of Blast Man stage. And let's save our game quickly. And let's just say this right now, we're definitely going to be jump into the forms of Blast Man stage. And once we're done with all the rest of the actual Robot Masters in Mega Man 11, then we would able to jump into the Wily Castle stages. Or to be more specifically, Dr. Wily Castle stages. So, yeah, you get the idea. So Blast Man stage is going to be filled with dynamite blocks, as you can probably tell by the forms of the actual stage's mechanic. And every time you actually just let these little dynamite looking men manage to able to actually hit on these specific blocks, then it'll able to actually also explode. So as you can see, that the actual speed with the forms of the Special Gear Booster, that way not only by the forms of how the fact that I'm pretty sure you can able to actually use that as more often, but you can also now finally move at the normal speed now, especially noticeable if you're actually using the speed gear mode. So yeah, that's a pretty handy though, especially noticeable if you really want to go for, let's just say, take for instance this section right here. Normally I can't go after by the forms of the actual extra 1-up if I don't have that upgrade. But if you manage to get that upgrade, then you would able to get that extra life so easily. So even then though, definitely a lot more helpful, especially noticeable when we get to nearly at the very end of the game. Which, either way though, it does really help. So anyway. So yeah, as far as I can usually say when it comes to like, let's just get back into the actual games I've managed to pick up recently. I think one of them, I've mentioned about this before, is the forms of Mortal Kombat for the PlayStation Vita. Finally going back into that game again, but this time with new exclusive content, stuff like PlayStation Vita's specific features, like touchscreen, motion controls, and you name the rest. And there's also another game I actually did pick up recently, and that is the form. So speaking of Mega Man, I've actually recently picked up myself Mega Man ZX for the Nintendo DS. I haven't really tried the game out for myself though, but it's usually kind of like how it does it in the Mega Man Zero series from the Game Boy Advance, which I haven't really got those games yet, but for I've heard that the Wii U Virtual Console games do have those. But either way though, I might as well give them a go eventually. And as a matter of fact, that I'm very glad that I've now managed to able to get myself a Mega Man game for the Nintendo DS. But in the forms of ZX, as the forms of like a somewhat of a continuation of the forms of the Mega Man Zero series, I'm not sure, but I digress. This mini boss is easily one of my least favorite mini boss fights, but if you're actually using the power gear with a Tundra Storm with you, then, you know, again, it deals the insane amount of damage, and you should be able to deal with that section easier. So, definitely way more up there than the forms of how you can able to expect it to. So, yeah. As far as the actual weapons themselves, when it comes to Mega Man 11 itself, I really do love all of them, actually. Well, almost all of it, actually, because either way, Block Dropper can able to deal out with enemies super easily throughout, and especially noticeable with the forms of, the Acid Barrier is actually really good for you when it comes to protectioning with the forms of projectiles and you name the rest. Bounce Ball, Bouncy Ball, or in this case Bounce Ball, we're able to actually send out the insane amount of projectiles with you, and especially noticeable with the forms of the Pile Driver, or the Pile Diver I should say, or Pile Driver. I really can't pronounce that very well folks, I do apologize. You can able to actually use that as a somewhat of a dashing maneuvering, which you can able to actually use that in mid-air, which is really cool, and also reminds me of Mega Man X games, but the forms of the actual dash upgrade that you can able to upgrade for. And also there is a Tundra Storm, which I mentioned to you earlier, acts like a screen nuke, and the Blaze Torch, which is actually pretty good of a weapon actually. Even though that it doesn't go all over the place, unlike the ones of how it does it in, you know, the weapons from Mega Man 5 that I felt pretty mixed upon or something like that. well, again, I really do apologize for the forms of, like, you know, after the disappearance of the forms of going back into the Mega Man games at this point. But either way, though, don't worry, though, when we get to... Oh, Jesus Christ. Although, thankfully, though, as soon as I'm able to get myself Beat the Bird, basically, Beat the Bird actually saves you from bottomless pits. It's kind of like the green balloon item from Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. And especially noticeable with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, that if you fall to bottomless pits and stuff like that, it actually saves you back up by the forms of how it usually just kind of think about it. And as you can see, the actual roulette system is a thing. And as you can see, I've got myself my energy tank. So screw that energy tank down there because I have no idea how do I supposed to get that. So either way though, let's just go ahead and continue onwards. Even though, again, in new forms of depends on what difficulties you've been selecting when it comes to energy tanks. You can only carry up to 6 energy tanks on normal mode, whilst in new forms of the easier difficulties or casual player mode, you can only hold up to 9 of them, which I could assume if I may be right or wrong, but either way though. So yeah, that's about it, and the third and the final game I've actually got myself with me, actually I'll get some more details onto that in the next video. Here we go with, you know, Blast Man. Now, as far as if you guys can clearly tell at this point, I'm gonna kill myself just because I can't handle him with a little bit of health left. But as long as I can able to actually use my speed gear and all that stuff to make this fight a little bit easier. But much like in any other Mega Man games, including by the forms within Mega Man and Base, I have to seriously commit suicide, and those I just need to able to have a proper match with him. So, anyways though, his weakness is the forms of Blaze Torch, because obviously if you manage to fuse the actual bomb with the actual fire, it'll actually create the explosion. So as soon as you deal the amount of damage with the forms of you know, Blast Man with the forms of Torch Man's weapon, then that's pretty much it. And there's another trophy right there, meaning, where's Wily? Oh jeez, yes, you might be wondering, yes, I wonder what he's up to this time. Well, at least we already know about this at this point, so there we go. I believe that's every single Robot Masters in Mega Man 11, so I can't believe we're almost at the forms of the 100 mark. What's to say, when it gets to the forms of Mega Man 13 or something like that, that way we're able to get the 100th Robot Master as far as I'm concerned with, so although it all depends though, really. So here we have Chain Blast, which actually is pretty good of a weapon too, because not only can you able to actually create somewhat of a bomb tossing weapon, but also if you manage to upgrade the actual like Chain Blast with the forms of the Power Gear system, it makes a bigger bomb, as you can see right there, to create a massive explosion, which will be definitely becoming handy.
Otto, do you have any idea where Wily's gone to?
He's totally vanished, Mega Buddy! Maybe he decided to turn tail and run! Huh?
What is it, Otto?
There's someone hijacking our signal!
Could it be?
Indeed it could! My genius neither runs nor hides!
Wily!
Light than you, Mega Man! How dare you use my double gear system! Now you've crossed the line, I'll turn you into scrap myself! I'm at point E1685578. Come to my gear fortress. I'll be waiting for you.
Gear Fortress? That's all we needed. I'm heading out, Dr. Light.
It's time to finish this. Good luck, Mega Man. It's up to you to stop Dr. Wily.
Yes, sir.
You can do it, Mega Man!
Mega, be careful out there.
Okay.
And just like how it does it from before, then once you deal with all 8 of those Robot Masters, the Wily's Fortress is up on its horizon. And as usual, I'm going to be saving that up for the next video because you know how you expect it when it comes to Mega Man playthroughs at this point. that, actually, before we, end off this video right here, I need to go ahead and purchase, I don't have as many of those, bolts I can actually purchase, but let's just go ahead and purchase myself, not only my energy tanks, but also by default of my extra life, after that death by default of Blast Man. So, anyways though, I think seems to say we got the endings off at this point right there, folks, so join me next time on Let's Play Mega Man 11. His stats, we're about to be taking on Wily's Castle for the 12th time. So, jeez, this is gonna be insane for the most part. So, yeah, that's about it, obviously. So yeah, see you guys next time. Later, fellas.